Hey, gang, Merry Christmas, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. This is our last time live together on YouTube for 2025. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Thank you so much for watching on YouTube. We've really built something nice here, and more of you are tuning in to watch, which we really appreciate. So that's good, and we've got really cool things planned for 2026. So Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here, especially those of you who are always here. I appreciate you. Yesterday's poll result at Smerconish.com, 28,920 votes cast. Is Turning Point USA ultimately a political asset or liability for the Republican Party? 68.77% said liability. 31.23% said political asset. Why would nearly 70% of those who responded yesterday at Smerconish.com of nearly 30,000 think that a gathering of 30,000 people in Phoenix, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of A-listers for the punditry class and the political class, J.D. Vance, the vice president, a third of the people who were there, college students. Why could that possibly be a liability? Well, it was because of what transpired. This year's America Fest, that's what it was called, the Turning Point USA gathering in Phoenix, didn't just showcase conservative unity, it showcased conservative fracture as well. And it all began with Ben Shapiro delivering a speech on Thursday where he said, if you host a Hitler apologist, Nazi-loving, anti-American piece of refuse like Nick Fuentes, then you ought to own it, which was a reference to Tucker Carlson. And then Tucker Carlson spoke, and he responded in kind, and then after, actually what he said was, I watched and I laughed. I watched and I laughed. Everybody's going to be like, you're a Nazi. You just like Fuentes. And then I'm going to be like, I don't think Fuentes is going away. And so it went, and then Steve Bannon came up, and he took the side of Tucker Carlson by saying that Ben Shapiro was a cancer, and so it went. And then came the vice president with his comments, and he said something that leads to today's poll question, which I'll get to in just a moment. May I thank my friends at Parx Casino for sponsoring all of our YouTube live conversations throughout the year, and also the friends at Play Gun Lake as well. I'll tell you something funny, speaking of Parks and Play Gun Lake. Last night, while I was doing my read-in for the program, I was watching Phillip Rivers with a little action in that game, courtesy of Bet Parks. It was Indianapolis. I have to be careful not to identify the team names, but you know who I'm talking about. Indianapolis hosting San Francisco. And I only hung in for a half, and I saw the way the momentum was shifting at the end of the half. But 44-year-old Phillip Rivers, who was coaching his son's high school football team a few weeks ago in Alabama, gets the nod, and there he is, I thought having a hell of a game. It looked awkward the way that he was throwing the ball, but it was really exciting to watch. I remember being a kid and rooting for George Blanda. And I had the same feelings that I had last night as I had as a kid, rooting for the old guy. Maybe now because I am the old guy. How did that happen? But it was really exciting, and Indianapolis hung in for a half, and then Brock Purdy was just too much. And when I woke up this morning early, I saw the result of the game. But it was fun to have skin in the game. That is my point. Courtesy of my handheld, had skin in the game and had some fun, even if it didn't go my way. Try something completely different. Play casino games with a live dealer at Bet Parks and at Play Gun Lake. You got to be 21 and in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, or Maryland for the Bet Parks app, and you've got to be 21 and in Michigan for the Play Gun Lake app. Your casino bonus has got to be wagered. BetParks.com and Play Gun Lake, they've got all the details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Okay, so I was making reference to what went on at America Fest, the Turning Point USA event in Phoenix, and it brings me to today's poll question at Smerconish.com, which, of course, you find right at the top of the daily newsletter. What am I asking today? I'm asking about some of the comments that were made by J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance yesterday Actually, here's the guts of what he had to say. More than at any time I can recount, people are talking about American identity and figuring out what it is that unites us. I want to say something here. The only thing that has truly served as an anchor of the United States of America is that we have been, and by the grace, we will always be a Christian nation. The poll question today at Smerconish.com asks whether you agree with that statement, whether you agree with that statement from the vice president. And we literally have a guy, an academic expert on the program today who has written a book. The title is essentially, Were We Really Founded as a Judeo-Christian Nation? When I referenced this in passing yesterday with what the vice president had to say, we were overwhelmed with calls. That's not unusual, but of viewpoints all over the lot in terms of whether people think of the United States as a Judeo-Christian nation. So that's the poll question. You might want to wait and listen to the expert on the program today talk about, historically, who were the founding fathers and what was their belief system. All right. May I please run through some of the headlines that are in today's newsletter? It's a very diverse issue of the newsletter, lots of different subject matter, front page stuff that's not on the front page, just a lot of good material that I want to quickly highlight, or not so quickly highlight, if I may. My lead story today at Smerconish.com. That's awesome, Thomas. You just scroll as I bloviate. We're showing for the benefit of those who are watching on YouTube, not just listening, what the headlines actually look like. So, lead story today. From the Hollywood Reporter, all about the spiked 60 Minutes story that didn't run, right? Spiked meaning did not run. Funny backstory, if I may. On Sunday, speaking of football, I was watching Aaron Rodgers. I was watching the Steeler game. They didn't do so well ultimately either, but exciting game to watch. And I guess is part of the design. I just kept it on CBS, and now I'm watching 60 Minutes. And I got sucked in by a show about Sherpas. You want to go, climb Kilimanjaro, you need Sherpas to do it. It was a really entertaining segment. What I didn't realize until the next morning was that I was watching the Sherpa segment because Barry Weiss, the head of CBS, had spiked what was supposed to air, which was this segment long in the planning and in research about that jail that we've been sending a number of our illegal migrants shipped back to Venezuela. Here's the Hollywood Reporter. The 60 Minutes segment that was spiked by CBS News editor-in-chief Barry Weiss for not being ready is now readily available online after the network that airs the show in Canada ran the original version of the program and subsequently released it online. 60 Minutes had been slated to run the segment which featured Sharon Alfonsi, the correspondent, and Oriana Zil de Grandos as the producer, speaking to Venezuelans who had been deported by the Trump administration to El Salvador's notorious Secot prison. So that's my lead story today at Smerconish.com. And here's the thing that I've done, which I recommend all of you do. I watched it. It exists, and if you navigate a little bit online, you'll be able to see it as well. The part I don't understand is how the hell did it get aired in Canada? But it did. I've also written on the backstory of all of this in the newsletter today. We've got some of the coverage that Brian Stelter provided at CNN. Wall Street Journal has a good backstory as well. And some people say, well, this is what Barry Weiss is supposed to do. She's supposed to be there to ensure balance. People at CBS are not happy because they think that she's too heavily putting her thumb on the scale to protect the Trump administration. It seems as if the administration didn't produce any person on camera who would be willing to rebut what 60 Minutes was reporting about this prison. And Barry Weiss wants their side told. Now, I don't know, to fault Barry Weiss or to fault CBS, because if the administration was given a choice and passed, then what was CBS supposed to do? therein lies the rub of this story, but I recommend you watch it, and I'll speak more about it on radio today. Perfect day to have Admiral Stavridis on the program. For my second story, I went with the Associated Press coverage. President Trump unveiling plans for a new missile-armed Navy warship that he calls a battleship, touting it as the centerpiece of a future Golden Fleet, despite questions about cost, feasibility, and the Navy's ability to deliver unproven technologies. If here's my theory. If he hadn't said he was going to name the fleet for himself, I think instead we'd be having a very reasonable conversation as to whether we need, and this is what I'll ask Admiral Stav today, whether we need to be enhancing our naval fleet. And my hunch is, given what the Chinese are up to in terms of their military expansion, we probably do. So don't think about his name as the determining factor as to whether this is a good or a bad story. Huge story from Stat News, also in the newsletter today. The FDA has approved oral Wegovy. This is a game changer. This is a game changer insofar as, and the story details, that you'll probably be able to pay $150 a month for a GLP-1 pill from Novo Nordisk, their drug Wegovy. So a lot of people who heretofore have been shut out of accessibility are going to have it for weight loss. I think it's a great story and a game changer. And I remember having an expert on the program from Kaiser Health not long ago talking about whether we'll reach a point soon where it pays for itself. I think we're there, meaning the amount of money that will now be paid for a GLP-1 in pill form, whatever the cost may ultimately be, long-term when viewed against someone who gets morbid obesity and heart disease as a result, and then we as a society end up paying for them. It's the old, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. I'd rather be paying now, and that's what's about to happen. As I'm coming on air here on YouTube, there's breaking news relative to a new tranche of Epstein documents. We have coverage in the newsletter today from The Guardian. A new tranche of Epstein files released by the Department of Justice includes emails from Balmoral summer camp referencing Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, that's Prince Andrew, or what he used to be, and claims involving Donald Trump, though there's no indication of criminal wrongdoing. I can tell you, and we have an image in the newsletter that people who are watching on YouTube are looking at right now, of Jeffrey Epstein, and I think it's Ghislaine Maxwell, who's captured from behind, at Balmoral, okay, at one of the most premier of the royal properties, and there is this convicted pedophile, deeply, deeply embarrassing at a minimum to the Brits and the royal family. How about this? Also in the newsletter today, from the New York Post. There are actually two stories in the newsletter today relative to the Brown shooting. I'll get to each, but this one under the headline, Campus Shooting Warning Ignored. The gist of this is that a custodian at Brown University said that on multiple occasions he reported the presence in the weeks leading up to the shooting. He reported the presence to a security person of a guy that creeped him out, believed to be the shooter. A couple of things, of course, I wonder is, number one, why wasn't that information acted upon? And number two, does that mean that there's more footage in the weeks leading up to the shooting of the shooter casing the campus? The presumption is that he gave that report to a private security person, not somebody employed by Brown. Not that that makes it any better, but what a troubling story. That a custodian saw something, said something, and nothing happened. From CNBC, do you like the format where I just kind of riff on the headlines of the day, because I enjoy doing it. And they're all in the newsletter, and I've read all these stories, and I've pulled all these stories. So why not just kind of spitball and shoot from the hip and tell you what the hell's going on in the world? From CNBC, headline, Why Warner Might Take Paramount Offer. This story may ultimately impact me relative to my CNN work. I have no inside knowledge of anything. I just read the trades like everybody else. But you probably know that Warner Brothers Discovery, which is the parent of CNN, is right now in play, as they say. And there are two primary bidders. One is Netflix. They put forth the highest bid initially. The second is Paramount. Paramount is owned by the Ellisons. They came in second position, and then they upped their bid. Paramount, going back to where I began with the rundown of the headlines, Paramount is also now the owner of CBS. It's Paramount, the Ellisons, who put Barry Weiss in charge of CBS, and hence 60 Minutes. So you can probably imagine there are some within the orbit of Warner Brothers Discovery who are nervous in thinking that if the Ellisons are the successful bidder, that similarly they'll put their thumbprint on all of those products, including CNN, with a Barry Weiss-type leadership. I think I said that fairly inaccurately. So what's new? The Ellisons now have said that they will guarantee the bid put forth by Paramount. That's the big news in the last 24 hours. So it's not over. The lead of the CNBC story, Warner Brothers Discovery shareholders face a high-stakes choice between tendering shares to Paramount's higher all-cash bid or backing the board's Netflix deal, weighing valuation, regulatory risk, and the potential upside of a bidding war. I mean, that's one of the other considerations, is that it's not just a dollars issue between who's got the higher bid, Netflix and Paramount, but the concern by Warner Brothers Discovery also has to be, can the Netflix deal get through the regulatory hurdles that are necessary, or will the Trump administration put its thumb on the scale? Hence, I've got the the CNBC story. Quickly, from NPR, President Trump has canceled or paused, I guess I should more accurately say, 5 major offshore wind projects. They're in New England, New York, and Virginia. There's apparently a foreign policy clash playing itself out between Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Trump envoy Steve Witkoff. We have that story as well. I have a pair of Tesla stories that I hope will be of interest to everybody, not just Tesla owners like yours truly. But one of them is from USA Today, and it's a comparison of gas prices versus charging your Tesla. Bottom line, less expensive to have a Tesla. And then some say, well, what if you need a new battery? You're not going to need a new battery, they say, until you've racked up 200,000 miles. That's one story. And I often get asked, how much does it cost to charge your vehicle? Read that story if you're interested. But there's a companion story from the Washington Post. Do you remember when Mitch McConnell, former Senate Majority Leader, Republican senator from Kentucky, when his sister-in-law, a tragic story, I want to say in Florida, was hosting her friends. They'd all gone to the Harvard Business School together. And after they were out together and had a couple of drinks and so forth, she was driving from one part of the property a short distance to another part of the property and inadvertently backed into a lake. I think it was a small man-made lake on the property. She couldn't get out of the car. Alcohol may have played a role, but she couldn't get out of the car. And we had the conversation on radio about how you got to break the glass in a Tesla because you can't wind down the window. So the whole issue of not only crash worthiness, but also ability to escape Teslas has been very much in the news. And here is a Washington Post story about a god-awful crash in Piedmont, California, that left 3 passengers dead, not from the crash, but because they couldn't get out and they were engulfed in flames. And it puts emergency responders in a very difficult position because they can't get into these vehicles. They can't get into a Tesla Cybertruck. So Tesla says they're doing something about it. You'll read that story if you're interested. From the Brown Daily Herald is story number 2 from the Brown shooting that I have in the newsletter today. This one, unrelated to the janitor who said something and saw something, at least as far as we know, is that the Brown police chief, not the Providence chief who you saw on television, but the Brown police chief has now been placed on leave. Then I've got Brian Stelter's coverage of the inside story about Barry Weiss deciding not to air the 60 Minutes show that I told you about. Interesting story from Axios. How do you know who's running in 2028? Which candidate is getting a makeover? So, J.B. Pritzker is losing weight, And Josh Shapiro, within the last 2 years, changed up his eyewear and lost his tie. The Kansas City Chiefs are moving from Missouri to Kansas. It's always confused me. But even though I've been there, and Chief fans in Missouri are heartbroken, but Chief fans in Kansas City are excited. National Review has an editorial in support of Ben Shapiro for the things that he did say at the Turning Point event in Phoenix. NPR, good coverage if you're wondering about what's going on relative to the Heritage Foundation. This kind of relates to what went on at Turning Point. Mike Pence and his Advancing American Freedom, the beneficiary of an exodus from Heritage. Sad story, Barry Manilow has lung cancer and has canceled some tour dates in January. Did I ever tell you the story of when I had what was that car? An MDX, I think. There was a time years ago where I had an MDX and my wife had an MDX. And Barry Manilow rode in her car. Well, she drove him. Good story for a different day. Politico coverage about Bill Clinton saying, please release all the Epstein materials because I'm getting scapegoated, which many of us agreed. President Trump has a new envoy to Greenland, Jeff Landry. He wants Greenland to know we still want to own Greenland. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, for shits and giggles, in the newsletter today, I got to say I went down this BuzzFeed rabbit hole. They have all, who knows what's true? Who knows what's true? But in BuzzFeed today, they have a list of celebrities and stories told by waitstaff, allegedly, who've waited on a whole slew of celebrities. Everybody from Bruce Willis to Jay-Z to Jane Fonda to Jennifer Lopez to Keanu Reeves. Who's a good tipper and who's not a good tipper? Who tips and who doesn't? And it's kind of funny because the stories are told with a lot of personal recollection. You know, the sort of thing that you hear me say on air. I believe that because it was told with a lot of detail. That's it. That's the newsletter today on this 23rd of December, 2025, 2 days before Christmas. I am immensely proud. Nicely done, Maya Baird, our newsletter editor. Looks great. And I'm just so glad that we've got a growing list of subscribers who really do read it, like a 69 to 72% open rate. So thank you for that. If you're not a subscriber to the newsletter, please make sure that you become one and vote today on the poll question of the day. Do you agree with J.D. Vance that the U.S. has always been and should remain a Christian nation? Newsletter will continue on every day. You know, it's like a newspaper. We're always on duty. But I will see you for my next YouTube Live on Saturday, January 3rd. Do I have that right? I do. I'm off CNN this Saturday. No more live radio after today, but good guest hosts, and Dan has done a hell of a job pulling together some fun best of content. So radio rolls on, newsletter rolls on, but YouTube Live, I'll see you before my CNN show on Saturday, January 3rd, and then back in our normal routine on Monday, January 5th. Merry Christmas.